My name is Sabne Raznik. You have found the channel here on YouTube where I do what I call mini readings, and usually I call it that because usually it's just one poem. Sometimes it's my work if I'm promoting something. Sometimes it's other people's work. If you go back through this channel, you will find a wealth of poetry from around the world, considered an intro to world poetry because, of course, I can't share everything that I like on this channel. Um, and, of course, I read the English translations because that's the language I'm most familiar with, and it is the language of the internet. um, but if you find a poem that you like and you are able to read it in the original language, feel free to do that. In fact, I encourage it. Read the translation side by side with the original language because poetry in translation can often be a very different art form than poetry in the original language. It's really fun like that. Very thankful for poetry in translation, however, because so many of us would not have access to so much wonderful, important, vital poetry if we could not read it in translation, even though it's very different from the originals. Um, the concept of this channel, I originally started it with just reading my work because I didn't want to violate anybody's copyrights. And then I decided I'm not going to monetize this channel. That way I'm not violating anybody's copyrights. And that way I can share other people's poetry because I thought of reading Rainbow with LeVar Burton, not putting myself in the same category with him. He is a legend. But I thought about how he introduced so many people to the love of reading by reading short stories, and then of course, later on he went into doing what's considered Reading Rainbow for adults, which was his podcast, LeVar Burton Reads, which he wrapped up in 2024 was the last season of that, but all the episodes are still available online for people to go back and re-listen or listen to for the first time again. But where he would read short stories for adults, LeVar Burton reads. So he has continued to do that for his whole life, really. and I was thinking about how that's such a beautiful thing for people, and I thought, well, what if we did a similar thing like that for poetry and opened it up to not just poetry from a specific region, but try to do it that for world poetry, which is almost impossible, really. But that's what I've tried to do with this channel, and this channel has been here since 2011. So, and going through the vicissitudes of life and with chronic health issues and all that, there have been times when I haven't uploaded, sometimes for a few years, because I would move and not have access to recording equipment or whatever for a while, and things like that would happen. So, but if you go, there's like, I don't know, something like 130, 140 videos on here now. If you go back through the channel, so I'm sure you'll find something you like. And I starting this year, 2024, I decided try to make it into some kind of schedule with uploading, right? And I've been able to do that by filming videos in blocks and then uploading them once a month. So that's why sometimes you'll see me wearing the same clothes for 3 or 4 videos, is because I've filmed them all in the same day and then uploaded them over a period of time. And I try to do that at least once a month. That's the schedule right now, is once a month. And if so far I've managed to keep that fairly consistent for this past year. That's been going well. If it continues to go well, I may make that more often. We'll see. Now these next two videos, the one that I'm filming now, the one that I'll be filming next in the same clothes, I'm doing those out of schedule. So they're both going to go up on the same day in the month of December, but I'm also going to upload the regular December video about 10 days from now, as I normally would, which I think should be a video about a poem by Ellen Maybe, I think was the next one on the schedule, I'm not sure. The reason why I'm doing these next two videos out of schedule is that they are tribute videos, which If you go back and look at the videos over the past year, I have done a few tribute videos for poets who died, and I would just wait and release them in the normal schedule. And sometimes it would be like a month or two after they died. But these I wanted to give special treatment because these are Appalachian poets who have passed. And I'm from Appalachia, and so I thought they need it. And what's interesting about that is that both of these Appalachian poets passed on the same day, which was yesterday. I'm filming this on December 10th, 2024. So both of these poets passed on December 9th, 2024. Everybody in the world, as of today, when I'm filming this, is already aware about the passing of Nikki Giovanni, who was from originally from Tennessee. Everybody's already aware of her because she was worldwide famous. Um, so I'll be making a video about her next. I'll do her next. But also passing on the same day, and the one I'm making the video about now, a poet named Don Amburgey. And interesting about him is, I've been a poet since I was professionally, more or less, as much as a poet can call themselves professionally, because like everybody knows poets don't really make a lot of money off their work. Even the poets that win the Nobel Prize in Literature, which is like the highest honor you can get as a poet in the whole world of all time, as far as that goes, as far as prestigious goes, even they have to have a day job. They tend to be like university professors and stuff. So it's not like you're going to make a lot of money being a poet. But so when I say professional poet, that means we do all the things. But as far as making money off of it, well, but everybody who is a poet knows how that works, right? Um, anyway, I've been doing this since I was 13, so that's a long time, and about more than 30 years, I would say. I'm bad at math, so I can't tell you exactly how many years right in this moment. I would have to like get off here and actually do some math. But during this whole time, right, I'd be hearing the name of Don Amburgey and hearing a lot about him. It was a case, but I've never actually met him. It was a case of us like running in the same circles. We knew some of the same people. We just never actually met each other, and so that was an interesting thing. So we were just like, and everybody always spoke of this poet with almost reverence. There was always great respect around his name. And I was like, okay, never had the opportunity to meet him. Well, a couple years ago, um, I'll try to leave like personal details of my life out of it because it's not necessary for you to know that. But I changed congregations. Like I'm still in the same faith and everything, but I changed from going from one congregation to another. And when I went to this new congregation, I mostly have to do it remotely now because my health and everything, circumstances being what they are, I'm not really able to go sit in the building and listen to them talk about the Bible in person. Um, so I do it over video conferencing most of the time and listen to it that way. So I'm sitting on the video conferencing app or whatever it is, and I see his name, Don Amberby, and I'm thinking, because it tells you who else is on the app with you. It doesn't tell you who's in the room in person. Listen, because they're in person, but who else is signed into the video conferencing with you? Like who else is sitting at home doing the same thing you are and listening to what's going on in that room? Who else is not in person? In other words, it can tell you that. So like, and there was his name, and I'm going, is that the poet? Okay, probably not. Probably not. Probably somebody with the same name, but not the poet, right? Because, like, Eastern Kentucky, okay, the communities are small, most of them are rural, blah, 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 but it's not that small. Like, you do have the whole small town vibe thing going on, but, like, it's big enough that you can have that happen where you have people with the same name that are different people, especially whenever you're going from one town to another. You know, it's like you can't just assume that because somebody has the same name that it's the same person, unless you know what I mean. So anyway, I mean, like I said, I mean, Appalachia is small and rural, but it it happens. People can have the same name and be a different person. So I'm like, okay, it could be like one of those things. And I just went about my business. But then somebody says, "Would you like to sit in on this? Would you like to go with me and sit in on this thing I've got going?" And I'm like, "Okay." So I go, and it turns out it's with his daughter, but I didn't know it was his daughter. And so I'm just sitting there listening to the conversation, and as she talks, I'm putting together that because she's talking about different circumstances for life, all incidental to what the conversation is about. And I am starting to put together the puzzle pieces of these hints that she's dropping. That the father that she's caretaking for is a poet, and that it's this guy that I saw on Zoom whose name is Don Amburgey. And wait a minute, but he's a poet. So that means that this guy that I've been seeing on this video conferencing app is the same Don Amberkey that's the poet. He is the same guy. So, like, that was really exciting for me. You know, it's like finally, after all these years, our lives finally brushed up against each other. And of course, by then he was in his 80s, and he was not always of the same faith I was. That was he had come to um, he had I guess the word would be converted to my faith later in life. So it was just like an interesting set of circumstances that caused us to brush our lives to brush up against each other there at the very end of his life for like the last couple years there, I guess. And well, last year really is whenever I finally put it together. The last year, and so that was really exciting for me. It was like, oh, it's this guy that I've been hearing about all this time that everybody has always had so much respect for. And so, anyway, he passed yesterday. And him being an Appalachian poet, too, I wanted to do a tribute for him. And I got permission from his daughter to read a poem of his on my YouTube in tribute to him. And I had her pick the poem. So, and this is from his collected poems that he published in 2008. And I will have a link, because I found it, I looked it up. I will have a link to the book in the description box. I try to always do that whenever possible. If I don't link to the book itself, I will at least put like title of book, um, the industry standard title of book, publisher, year published in the description box wherever it is, or a link to wherever it is I got the poem, because sometimes I don't get the poems from books, sometimes I get them from websites, which is what's going to happen with the Nikki Giovanni poem that I'm going to read. I got the Nikki Giovanni poem from the Poetry Foundation website. So wherever it is that I happen to get the poem that I read in the video, I will give you its source in the description box whenever possible. Whether that be I cite the book, or I will link to where you can buy the book, or I will give you the link to the website where I pulled the poem up. if it happens to be a resource like Poetry Foundation or the Academy of American Poets website or something like that, I will always try to do that in the description box so that you can go and find that for yourself. Also another one of my favorite resources, as I'm sure you've discovered if you've watched more than one of these videos, is um, my mind just blanked on me. I do that a lot. It's part of my health conditions. Um, and sometimes I don't always pronounce things properly. That's part of my health conditions as well. Um, in case I do that later. um, Poetry International Web, one of my favorite websites for finding poems from around the world from different poets. Love that website. I have not been able to read everything on it, but yeah, I always try to link or cite the source, something like that, somewhere in the description box. Okay. I try to keep information in the description box to the bare essentials because I know people don't usually read the description boxes. Um, and also, if they do, they're not going to want to read a lengthy one. So I try to keep it short and sweet, the bare essentials, but I do try to link the sources. Okay, so in case you are looking for the sources, and also because that's just basic decency when you're using somebody else's work, right? This is Amburgey's poem "Thoughts of Spring." Like I said, it's from his collected poems, published in 2008. She sent it to me over Facebook Messenger, um, and I wrote it down. I oops, didn't know that was open. I hand wrote it, um, hand copied it out of Facebook Messenger into my journal where I write poems for two reasons. One, I will always have a copy of it for my own edification, my own sentimentality or whatever. Two, so that I could read it to you because I use my phone to um, record, and Facebook Messenger is on the phone. Couldn't read the poem off the phone and record with the phone at the same time. So I had to find a workaround with that. Let's hope I can read my own writing on here. Um, so, because I had this thing happen, which is, there's my puppy. I had this thing happen not long ago, well, a few years back, which is also part of my health issues, where I got so spastic in my hands or something, or maybe it was like an arthritis threat, I don't know, but I lost the ability to write for a while. And I put myself through physical therapy boot camp. I didn't go to a doctor to have it done. I just did it myself because I got so mad. I was like, I have lost so much of my ability to do things that I used to be able to do, um, which is like part of growing older with my condition. And I was like, the one thing I am determined not to lose is the ability to write because poet. And and I got so mad. I was like, nope, we're going to do this. So I put myself through boot camp to learn how to write again, and I managed it. But my handwriting is it was always messy, and which I think I never got good marks in penmanship in school. Um, but it's worse now, and I was like, well, at least I can write though. So anyway, let's hope I can read this. I'm gonna take my glasses off. These are not my prescription, but they're better than nothing. They help me with the faraway stuff, but I do have to take them off to read. I am going to get this fixed, though. I'm working on it. I am working on it. I've got solutions in the pipeline. No worries. All right. Thoughts of Spring from Collected Poems published 2008. My thoughts of spring go lifting and leaping beyond the tops of hills, snitching rides on running shadows. With thoughts of spring like dust devils rushing along the roadway, flushing birch tops with green breath. Outrageous thoughts of spring overarching bright fields of Elysian marguerites. I feel I'm playing in the Milky Way. In thoughts of spring, I'm free as I go soaring and falling like chimney swifts, bursting the shackles of winter camp. Now, I'm not like this great expert on Don Amburgey's poetry or anything, but one thing I did notice when I read this is that there's this. It's probably just a me term because I run this e-zine called Avant Appalachia, which is all about the experimental and avant-garde, and because Cyanide, Philinide, and there were all these poets writing that sort of thing in Appalachia, but they had no outlet for it. So I made this e-zine where we could publish that stuff to show off that part of what was going on in the Appalachian literary scene because they needed an outlet. Well, if you're going to do that, then what do you call the rest of Appalachian poetry? Whenever people talk Appalachian poetry, what pops in their head? The stereotypical, well, put it that way, the stereotypical Appalachian poetry. What do you call that? So I coined the phrase apple trad, APPALTRAD, apple trad, for what pops in your head, stereotypically pops in your head when you think Appalachian poetry. And when I was reading this poem, I thought Don Amburgey is writing the line between apple trad and the new Appalachian poetry. He's not apple trad and he's not the new Appalachian poetry. He's writing that line. He's kind of like the Yeats of Appalachia because Yeats wasn't a modern poet. He wasn't a Victorian poet. He was in the middle. He was writing that line like this. He was like on a tightrope going woo, woo, woo. And if you read Yeats and you read Victorian poets and you read the other poets who were writing at the same time as Yeats, like T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pound and the Dadaists, you will see what I mean. Yeats is his own unique person, and he's like on this tightrope that's riding that line between Victorian the Victorian sensibilities of poetry and what was everybody else was doing post 1914. And he's just like doing his own thing. He's neither one. He's just doing his own little. He's kind of a little bit of both and neither one at the same time. That's what Don Amburgey is doing. He's a little bit of both and neither one at the same time, because his poems don't rhyme. So he's doing verse libre here. So there's that little bit of the new Appalachian poetry because things don't rhyme. But in every other aspect, it's very apple trad. You've got, it's very pastoral, thoughts of spring, beyond the tops of the hills, talks about birch tops, so he's talking about trees and then he pops out something that's very Victorian, very Keatsian and all that. Elysian marguerites. That's like something straight out of, Shelley and Byron and Keats. Okay. And then you've got, which is very much like when I was growing up, when I was young, my first encounters with poetry were all the romantic poets like Keats, Shelley, Byron. That was my baseline, and of course, the King James Bible, which is Shakespeare. Because King James was the very next king after Queen Elizabeth. So you've got King James would have been around the time Shakespeare died. So then you've got that is the foundation on which Appalachian poetry resided for 500 years. That's the Romantic poets and the King James Bible for up until the 90s and say around 2000. And then that foundation broke and people started writing different things. So you can see that, and Don Amburgey comes from the old the old guard, as we would call it, because he just died and he was in his 80s when he died, right? So he comes from the old guard, what I would call the old guard, the people I grew up reading. That actually I was rebelling against when I started writing. No offense, because I love. I mean, like I said, I grew up going, "Who is this guy?" And I was very pleased and excited whenever I discovered that he was actually in my close orbit finally. But he was in that old guard that whenever I first started writing when I was 13, I was actually rebelling against, right? I didn't want to write that kind of poetry. And so he comes from that background and you can see it, especially when he goes into Elysian Marguerites, because that's like straight out of Keats, right? But then he's writing that line because nothing rhymes. Nothing rhymes. And then even his rhythm scheme is very um it's a very verse libre rhythm. It's not following the patterns that a romantic or Victorian poet meter scheme would follow. Whenever you read it, the rhythm on your tongue, it's not a romantic or Victorian rhythm on your tongue. So it's very much a postmodern rhythm on your tongue. Just like where he's breaking there's no rhyming. Very postmodern in the fact that there's no rhyming. Very postmodern. So he's riding that line. See, he's neither this nor that. Like Yeats, neither this nor that. He's his own. He's riding that tightrope between the two. He's of the old guard and not of the old guard, like Yeats. He's of the new and not of the new, like Yeats. It's so basically what he is, because he's actually, in terms of age, in terms of lifespan, he is old guard. Like Yeats, in terms of lifespan, should be firmly, actually, should be, yeah, in terms of lifespan, should be old Victorian. Because Yates like lived through 1914. He died like in 39, I think. Yes, because he died the same year that Seamus Heaney was born. Interesting fact. If you're into Irish history. So, um, Yates, Yates should be a Victorian poet, right? In terms of his lifespan and his sensibilities, and actually, um, him being of the British Yeats was of the British aristocracy in Ireland, living through the Easter Rebellion. A lot of his friends' sensibilities were part of the rebellion, the Easter Rebellion, but he was very much of the British aristocracy. He was landed. He inherited a title, he inherited land. He was very much of the opinion that he had to get married and have children so that they could inherit the title and the land. He had aristocratic sensibilities, right? So he should have been Victorian. Don Amburgey, by his life, by his lifespan, should be old guard Appalachian. By his writing, he's writing one. He's actually a harbinger of the change that we have seen happen in the last 20 years. He was saying before it happened, before the change actually happened, he was saying, "Look, this is coming." He was the harbinger for people like me. Yeah, just like Yeats was the harbinger for the generations that came after him in Irish history, Irish literature. Isn't that interesting? I'm just, and I get all that from just reading one poem. I can see the parallels. I wonder what he would think about being compared to Yeats. He's like the Appalachian Yeats. He really, I mean, not in terms of being of fame, because he's not worldwide famous, and he didn't win a Nobel Prize like Yeats did. Um, but I mean, Mika Giovanni is much more famous than him. But in terms of his actual poetics is what I'm talking about. I just thought that was interesting reading this poem. I can see that he was the harbinger for people like me. He was saying, "Look, this is the change that is coming. I'm going to ride this line, and I'm I'm not going to be one or the other. I'm not going to be old guard or new. I'm just going to like quietly foreshadow what is coming." I think that's fascinating. But anyway, I will link to his collected poems in the description if you are interested in checking that out. And rest in peace, Brother Amber, as he was when he died. And sad day though for Appalachian poetry. Two Appalachian poets in one day. Two rather significant Appalachian poets in one day. I mean, Don Amburgey may not be worldwide famous the way Nikki was, but in eastern Kentucky, he was known and spoken of fondly. Mm-hmm. He was regionally famous. We'll put it that way. He was regionally famous. Um, so I thought that he deserved to be noted too. And I would like to say a special thank you to his daughter for allowing me to read this poem and for picking this poem, choosing this poem for me to read. It's a fitting one, I think. All these, if you think about it in the light of the context of his death, all these the imagery. I thought the spring go lifting and leaping beyond the tops of the hills, snitching rides on running shadows. And then there's I'm free as I go soaring and falling like the chimney swifts. I love chimney swifts. I've got chimney swifts in my backyard. They're so cute. They make this chitter chitter chee sound, and they do this thing, and they're so light and which all birds are, but they're just a different kind of light. I'm free as I go soaring and falling like the chimney swifts, bursting the shackles of winter camp. So it's, like this liberating liberating thing, and this idea of freedom and movement, and it's just in the light, in view of death, I can just picture him being like, whew, we're just gonna leap and frolic, like he's young again. It's nice. It's a nice thought, you know. But I will leave you with that then. From now on, every time I see the chimney swifts out in the backyard doing their little chir chir chee, and they're so quick. They're just flitting in and out, flitting in and out. Every time I see the chimney swifts or hear them, because they're so quick that usually I hear them but don't see them because they are so quick. Um, from now on, every time I hear them or see them, I'll think of Dawn. I'll think of Brother Amburgey. But anyway, I will leave you with that lovely thought, and I guess I'll move on to um, Nikki Giovanni. And I hope you guys have a lovely day. Thank you for sharing this half hour or so with me, and for taking this time to do this tribute to a special Appalachian poet today who has left us. And yeah, feel free to go through the rest of the channel. Nikki Giovanni is coming, and then, like I said, there will be the regularly scheduled December mini reading 2, which I think will be about Ellen Mabey this month, and which I filmed months ago. Ellen Mabey has the patience of an oak tree. Waiting for that video to um, release. So, um, thank you so much for joining me here today, and Dona Dago Hunting till we meet again.